The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we're embracing the hype as we cover new and upcoming games we played at Games Day 2024. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's happening, Doug? How are you?
I am okay. Second time's a charm. Let's try and press the record button this time.
Yeah, hey, we're still learning, right? Episode 172. It is our first annual, semi-annual hype episode. Right? I feel like we have a local furniture store in a community near us that is constantly going out of business.
Yeah, so, I think everyone does.
Yeah, so whenever we drive by, I'm like, look, it's their semi-annual going out of business sale, huh? And that's what this is a different type of episode, right? Why don't you tell our listeners what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, so normally Michael and I talk about a game a week. We talk about the School of Gaming, and we tend to focus on... I shouldn't say we tend to focus. I would say we ignore the hype. You know, there's constantly churn. New games are coming out, and we want people to take the time and enjoy either the games they have, look back, and maybe there's a classic that's in a bargain bin somewhere, and you can enjoy that. And occasionally we talk about games that have just come out, and we enjoy that as well. Michael and I have a hard time fighting the hype, just like anybody else, when you're constantly inundated with this new game, this new game, this new game. Everything's coming out, and it seems as if the moment a game comes out, people forget about it because they're looking ahead to the game that's coming out next month. So, Michael and I have decided to have a couple episodes a year where we lean full-blown into that hype and talk about some of the games that we're excited about and we're hearing about. The other episode we'll do is after Gen Con, but Michael and I are lucky enough to get the opportunity to go to the ACD Games Day, which is a trade show for retailers, and we're able to go there and demo a lot of games that are coming out at Gen Con, games that just got released or are shortly coming in the next month or so, and it's a really cool opportunity to walk around and look at booths and see games set up, see games that are coming out, and then actually get to try some of those games, either playing a couple turns or kind of getting a brief overview. So we want to talk about and share some of the games that we've seen this past week.
Yeah, and keep in mind, a lot of the games come from a single night. There's an evening called Demo Night, where from 8 p.m. to midnight, you are min-maxing like crazy, trying to get in as many games as possible. And so I'll speak for me. I may not know the games as well as I would if we're coming into an episode and I'm thinking, okay, what is the story of this one game we're going to talk about? And what's on my high five list? So some of it, I'm still curious about games. I'm still wondering about games. And I love what Games Day brings from that standpoint. Same sense I get when I have a multi-day convention and I just stumble into a random game here or a new game there. You get that in that one evening.
Yeah, and this tabletop games is just one part of this trade show. There are people that are showing off all the latest dice that are coming out.
Did you learn a lot about dice this week, Doug?
Not as much as I have in the past, because I have avoided them. I'm always amazed by the number of dice that are coming out every year, and people really get excited about that.
People in my house get excited about that.
There's also role-playing and miniatures games and every type of tabletop game that you can think of. We tend to focus on the board and card games while we're there. What else? Anything else we need to talk about before
it was
we just
great to see
dive
people.
In?
Yeah, it's just great to see people and meet people. The hobby is really it is a diverse group of people. And one night at dinner, a couple of guys sat down, Doug and this other very nice person had a conversation about painting minis. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand many of the words that were coming out of Doug's mouth or this other store owner's mouth at all. And then there was some Batman slander, and that's when I got involved in the conversation. And things got so heated that other tables started to get a little uncomfortable, and that's how you know you're making friends. So it was nice. It was nice to be in our state's capital, which is Madison, Wisconsin, here in the United States. And it was nice to meet new people and see familiar people again. As we continue to go to these events, it's nice to see and get to know people even more.
Yeah. And I will note that slander about Batman did not come from me.
No, but I will note your note. I was expecting a little more support. Really had to stand on my own with my own feet planted in the ground, wiggle my toes, and take a breath. But I was okay. No arrests were made, so it was a good night. And I do have plans to go ahead.
I couldn't defend you because I had not seen the other movie.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The other movie.
Whoa. Okay. Well, we won't go too deep into that inside joke, but that's good. And I have the gentleman's business card right here, so I do plan on going to his store when I'm traveling for work in just 1 month. So
wearing a Batman t-shirt.
I'll be at Alpha Omega Hobby in Quincy, Massachusetts.
All right. It was cool catching up with people, like Michael said, that we've seen before and get to know new people. Got to have a nice conversation with the owner of Queen Games, which was really fascinating, and his background and story and kind of some of the inspirations and things that he is intending to put into the company, his kind of philosophies and things like that. So a lot of interesting conversations were had all around. With that out of the way, let's kind of dive into the games that we want to share and talk about. I've got a list of about 14 games that stood out to me. The first one of those being one that we've talked about briefly on the podcast, more out of that it may be coming out, something along those lines, but that's Foundations of Metropolis, which is coming in, I believe they said shortly before Gen Con. It should be at Gen Con, and that is from Arcane Wonders and Emerson Matsuuchi. And this is the streamlined, slimmed down, affordable for the everyman version of Foundations of Rome, which I think is a really cool game. I just don't have the cash to purchase that game for what it is. Michael, Mr. Moneybags Michael, he's got that version.
No, stop. Yeah, that was an impulse of all impulses. It was the end of my new gamer enthusiasm. I may have the metal coins and the backpack and the playmat to go with it, but yeah, we all make mistakes, and I do.
You don't
I do
regret
love
that.
it.
That's
I
not a
love
mistake.
I do love it. Yeah, I do love that game. But let's talk about Foundations of Metropolis, because I cannot wait for you to get that so I can play it.
Yeah, it's a set in modern day city building as opposed to ancient Rome, and you're using cardboard polyominoes instead of fancy sun-dropped miniatures on a board that requires a full calyx cube and its own carrying bag just to get it from location to location. So I'm looking forward to trying that. Emerson Matsuuchi does such a good job of streamlined mechanisms, whether it's Century Spice Road or Reef, that I'm curious to see that this game somewhat has an abstract feel, but I'm curious to see how I feel the themes are represented, if it matters or doesn't matter, or if I enjoy the new version. But I'm excited not only to get that in my hands, but for a bunch of people to get that and try that game, because I think it is a phenomenal game.
And what you've mentioned offline before, you think that you may, and maybe not to speak for you, but you might see the strategy and nuances of the Metropolis version differently than if you're handling these giant miniature buildings and placing them on your map. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I'm curious to see if, when you're not sitting there mesmerized by all of the bling and the niceties, if you can focus a little bit more on the gameplay, is certainly something that's there. But definitely a game I'm looking forward to. Arcane Wonders has a couple of other games that, especially Comic Hunters, but that's going to be in cooperation with Spin Master, so they're going to be the main lead on releasing that. But I'm excited about that one as well. So Arcane Wonders seems to have some good stuff in the queue, and Foundations of Metropolis is on the top of the list for me on that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to jump in, and I cannot wait to see that game. I think you said everything perfectly, better than I could, so I'm going to jump to a different game, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump in with a hobby-level game that I missed on, folks. I did not back this on Kickstarter because it was after my New Gamer Enthusiasm, when I was more of a discerning buyer of board games and running out of space. And that's Harrow County, the game of Gothic conflict. This is from designer Jay Cormier and Shad, and publisher Off the Page Games. I have Mind Management, another game from the same designer. And I had a true fanboy moment where I had this happen twice during Games Day. But with Jay, I actually got done playing his game and then found out he was the designer and told him how much of a fan I was of his. But the other cool moment that happened.
It's like a schoolgirl meeting the Beatles.
Oh, it really was. It really was. Maybe we'll have a Beatles tie-in just a moment. Foreshadow. The other cool thing about that, though, the whole thing why I sat down and wanted to play the game and see the demo is because our friend Dan designed the insert. And when you go on Board Game Geek and you see full credits, you could sometimes see who the solo designer is, who the developer is, but you might not always think of insert designer. And I just wanted to mention that Dan got a ton of praise. And so it was really cool. Here's a guy that's in our game group. We go to church with him. He's a good friend of ours. And he's being held up as one of the best in the business for designing inserts. And I thought, man, that's cool. That's that incidental, accidental connection that I only get when I get out and about and go to a convention or go to a place like this. So the actual game itself, I was blown away by too. I came home and instantly, added it to wanted trade list, and it's 1 to 3 players. It looks like a Root Light is how it was described. An asymmetric game where you try to protect, destroy, rule, or infect Harrow County. I thought there was going to be more scary horror stuff. That's one reason why I didn't back it. Really, it's more area control and route building and protecting your route stuff. And it has a battle system where you drop cubes out of a tower, which I always love, but it's in the game box. And again, we only saw a 15-minute demo of it. We each got to play a turn. Looks slick, and if I don't get it into my collection, it's one that I certainly want to play at a convention or get to the table at some point.
Yeah, awesome. Michael mentioned the Beatles, and there's a game that intrigued me, and it's a game called Hi-Fi. This is from Smirk and Dagger Games. From what I can tell, it's looking to come out at around August, so maybe Gen Con. The designer is Andre Teruya Eichenberg. And the story of the game is essentially a band, one of the biggest bands in the world, like the Beatles, broke up while they were recording their last album. And the first side became kind of a cult favorite, and they've now reunited, and they're going to finish the second half of the album. And they're kind of auditioning producers. And this is an action selection game, but the action selection is on a vinyl record in the game box that looks like a record player as you're picking your options. The rule book looks like a Rolling Stones kind of knockoff with the same font and the band on the cover. And you're playing audio tracks down and changing levels and doing all this stuff to try and be the best producer that you can be. And I like this not only because of the theme and the production, but there's been a lot of, I feel like there's been several music titles or music themed games that have come out recently or are coming out, but they all seem to be in that hobby category or certainly light hobby. And this one is going to be under 70 minutes, and so I feel like it's fitting in that family to light hobby area that more suits my style, and so I'm excited about that as well. And that's from Smirk and Dagger Games, Hi-Fi. All one word, by the way, all crumpled in if you're looking for it on BGG. No hyphen in there.
That's why I couldn't find it on BGG. Thank you. I'm going to stick with
me as well.
I'm going to stick with Smirk and Dagger, and they have a new game because this episode's all about the hype, and that's the newest game in the Boop line, and that's called Boop the Halls, which will have a Christmassy or holiday-y theme. So it builds on the award-winning 2022 version of Boop, and instead of kittens knocking each other off of a bed and turning them into cats and trying to get 3 cats in a row in a line to win the game, this one almost has like a Christmas tree setup. We got to see a prototype of it out on the table, or am I imagining it and we just saw pictures? We saw an actual prototype on the table, right?
Yeah,
I remember looking at it like, oh, that looks cool. And I just a shout out to Kurt Covert, the owner of Smirk and Dagger. He was very generous with his time. He actually sent me home with a copy of Boop, and I got that played for the first time. It's been on my want list for a while. Actually played it 5 times since trade day, and it's a ton of fun playing it with my 8-year-old. I haven't played against my wife yet, but my wife destroyed my 8-year-old and brought about tears. I was proud of my wife, and also really a game. I'm getting off track here, but
fast forward to next week. Michael will be in the one in tears as
Correct.
His wife destroys him as well.
Thank you for getting me back on track. And there's 3 games in this line now, and I just cannot wait to see how far they go and all the different directions that it takes. The second game in the line, do you want to tell our listeners about that one, Doug?
It's a Halloween-themed version, but if you are interested in that, I don't believe it's going to be reprinted for this coming Halloween season. So what's out there is out there. So get it now if you're interested in it. I don't know if next year they may reprint it and go back to that again, but I think they're kind of going through some of the holidays here, and the Christmas tree version one will be coming out this year.
And a great game for 2 players, abstract, quick, and our friends over at the Family Gamers, Andrew and Anitra, they've covered this game from day one. So if you have more questions or if Boop is something that you're interested in, hop into our Discord. Anitra's there, or go to their website, which is Family Gamers AA, and you'll be able to track down more information on Boop.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying that one out. I'm usually not. It's not one that would probably get a ton of play in my house, but this is the guy that's been playing Mastermind with his kids lately, and everybody's having a blast. So who knows? Maybe I don't know how to pick out games. The next one, sticking with Smirk and Dagger games, Kurt sent me home with a game that I'm really excited about, and I'm excited about it because in the game schooling universe, I think there's always a push for storytelling games. And I think it's a really hard genre. And Michael and I have not really been able to recommend or talk about one on the podcast because every time I try them out, I see kids get uncomfortable with it whether it's they don't feel like their story is going to be good enough, or there's one kid at the table that is really good at telling stories and then mine's not going to be as good, or there's shyness, a lot of stuff like that. The next game that I'm talking about is Adventure Party, the role-playing party game. And what I like about it is it has prompts, and it's not necessarily about the storytelling, even though you're telling stories. In the game, each player takes a turn as a guest master or a GM, and will read a scenario, some sort of obstacle that the party is facing, and then in turn order, each player has a character on their character screen. It says what a character like that may be good at, things that they excel at, and maybe things that they're not great at. And then they have 2 item cards in front of them, and they're going to announce what their plan is, what they plan on doing to the troll that's trying to stomp them, or the dragon that's about to breathe fire on them. And maybe they've got a potion, and they lay out kind of their plan. And then they roll a 20-sided die behind the screen, with a 20 being a smashing success, a 1 an absolute failure, a 9 being we just missed it, and a 10 we barely made it. You roll the die. Nobody sees it. You then need to describe what happened in order to get the GM or the guest master to guess the number that you rolled. So what's the difference in telling a story between a 3 and a 4 or an 11 and a 13?
Yeah.
As you're going through. And I like that there's structure. It's cooperative. Everybody's cheering everybody on. You want to do well for each other as opposed to, well, Michael told the better story, so of course he's going to win. And I am intrigued by the idea of having an approachable game that's not scary to people when you talk about role-playing or fantasy, and a light version for people that do like those type of games. Like, I can rewind and have some fun with this.
Yeah.
And they talk about the idea of, like, rolling a 1 in this game can be just as fun as rolling a 20.
Well, and you have those parameters built in. If one is death and 20 is win, so what's in between there? What does a 7 mean? How bad of a fail is it? And how Doug approaches a fail and how I approach a fail, those are going to be two very different stories.
Yeah.
Doug's more dramatic, all right, telling everybody that up front. But what I also really like about that game, talk about a game that would play differently if you're playing with your kids or your nieces and nephews versus if you're playing with, 4 of your closest friends.
Yeah.
So that is a game that could have two very different feels, multiple feels to it. I'm really excited to try that one out.
Yep. So that is the Adventure Party, the role-playing party game. It's coming out soon, I believe. There was a Kickstarter for it originally, and I think it's about to hit retail fairly soon.
Awesome. So, Doug, I'm going to let you spin the wheel here. Are we going with hobby game? Are we going with lightweight Euro game? Are we going with kids game? Which one?
How about you tell me a publisher, and then I can piggyback off of that if I have the same publisher. So you give me the list of publishers instead of the type of game. Can you do that?
How about I throw one out that you've already heard today?
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
that works out for me.
Kutna Hora, the City of Silver from CGE. This is a game that I wanted to pick up at Gen Con. However, I only had 2 arms. And so it was like, CGE, what I love about them, they make great games, and their games stay in rotation. They are published. You can get them now, a year from now, 2 years from now. And Kutna Hora is an older game because it came out in 2023.
Fossil.
But this, when I saw it on the table, it exceeded my expectations. I'd already had it on a want to play, want to trade list on Board Game Geek. If anyone's looking to flip theirs, you can find me. Teach for a living. But in Kutna Hora, it takes place in a village in Europe in like 14 or 1500, something like that, and you're mining. Okay, well, what makes this one different from 15 other games like that I've played? You're not exchanging resources. You're playing cards out of your hand, and the main resource is coins. And when you play a card out of your hand, the cards are two-sided. And lately I've been playing games that have this mechanic built in where the cards give you multiple choices, but you can only make one of them. And I really enjoy that decision. And so you're building out a mine, you're building out a little tableau in front of you, but the economy is changing. It's a dynamic economy that you're not exchanging to wood and shifting it. No, you're actually moving these little dials. And where I'm interested in it, it didn't seem fidgety. The thing that's held me back from this when I've heard it described or looked at it or even saw it briefly at Gen Con, I thought, that might be fidgety. You have those 6 different dials. But actually seeing it on the table, I could instantly see like, no, the card just slides in behind the dial to show you where the economy is set. If I had 3 of them over here, somebody had 3 of them over there, it'd play great. So terrible description to a hobby level game, but I do want to call out the individual who taught it to us, Jaffer Batika, was phenomenal as a teacher. And Doug, I'll send it over to you to say a few things, but Jaffer did a great job.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's really hard when you go to either a demo night or even when you're walking around the booths at Gen Con and you have people describing games, and there's kind of an awkward thing of, sometimes you sit down and they try and teach you the whole game, and it's like, I don't need to play the whole game. And then sometimes they're so high level that you're like, okay, but what do I actually do on my turn? And it's such a fine balance, and they handled this one great for how heavy of a game this was. Made it seem approachable for a simpleton like me that I'm like, I could probably get into that one and at least try it out once. And like you mentioned, CGE, they only put out a couple games a year, and as a result, they get to put a lot of attention and time and focus on getting the word out there and highlighting those games so they have a longer tail as opposed to, I got 20 games coming out on Gen Con and you will have forgotten them by Essen, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that from them.
Yeah, and Doug said simpleton, but Doug is a master teacher of board games. And the fact that this person was able to teach us, I think it was 6 different possible actions. It might have been 4, but my brain says 6.
No.
I didn't write it down.
It was
15
11
minutes
at night as well.
Yeah, and we walk away like, oh yeah, I think I could come back to that and play it again next week. I thought really spoke very highly. So that's one that I'm really excited to get and play and learn more about.
Yeah, and there's a historic element to it as well. So it's based on a real city with some ties to the actual town. So I'm curious to see how well that plays out and learning that. Sticking with CGE, or Czech Games Edition, they have a game coming out at Gen Con called Little Alchemists. Alchemist was a game that they published several years ago, and it is a deduction game in which you are trying to figure out basically what certain potions do or how you can combine potions together to make other things. And it was fairly complex and complicated, one that I had never played. However, the new version, this Little Alchemist, is a kid's version, or certainly a ramping up family style game where you start basic, and over the course of 7 or 8 games, you are adding complexity and branching up to potentially playing the full game with some rules variations and things like that. And the way that they've done it and kind of laid it out as they were explaining to me was really intrigued by teaching some of those essentially science experiments in a box, right? Okay, what happens if I combine these 2 potions? And there's either an app or a card that tells you, well, this is what happened. And so then you have to start deducing, well, if that happens when this happens, then maybe this is this and that type of thing. And I love that skill. I love training that skill and teaching kids how to do that, and to have kind of a roadmap approach of it with the game is really intriguing to me. And I'm really looking forward to checking that out to see how it develops on a game that the original game intrigued me. I knew it was too complicated for me or anybody I would play it with, but this as an entry point is really cool.
Yeah, and we talk about scaffolding all the time, right? You got the Little Alchemist to Alchemist. I guess my hope is that you and I are in the hobby long enough that we'll have some games for when we're in our later years, right? Like Aging Alchemists, or instead of My Little Everdell, it's the Old Forest, where when we're 80 years old, 85, 90, 95, 112 years old, we're still playing board games. So that's something to hope for, right?
I think it's more of a hill. And I think you play Little Alchemists, and then when you're in midlife, you play Alchemists, and then when you get old, you go back to Little Alchemists.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see where it goes, Doug.
We'll be 90, and I'll be like, hey, I think I can only manage My Little.
You have your future. I have my future. We'll see what happens.
All right, we'll put a wager on it.
I'm not betting that. All right, where do we want to go next? You like to go by publisher. Let's go with Pegasus Spiel.
Ooh, okay.
All right. Do we want to go with a great game with set collection, or a very interesting game that might have this many towers? Which one should I talk about next?
You do the first one. I'll take the second one's on my list.
All right, cool. So Alpaca is a game coming from Pegasus Spiel, designed by Christian Glove, and it's a set collection game which is targeted towards families and younger gamers, in which you are,
Do you mean deck building? Deck building, not set
What am
collection.
I saying? Set building? Sorry, man. Too many mechanisms, too many notes. But you're building a deck of these alpacas, and you're basically trying to get rid of lower ones, bring in upper ones. Anybody who's built a deck before in a card will know what. But it's got these cute alpacas. The mechanism that I was intrigued by was you then put them in a fence. So there are these little fences that you kind of tuck the cards under. It's one that I'm interested to try if I get the chance with my family. I don't know if I'll run out and grab all 4 in the series. Pegasus Spiel is coming out with 4 of them. Foxy was another game that we got to see, which was very different. It had a whole different memory component to it that I don't really have much interest in. But I do love some deck, bag, and pool building, which is where Alpaca fits in. And it's competitive, which seems to fit with my family. A lot of game in a little box, too. So that was one that I'm looking forward to checking out at some point.
And I think that one's available now when I did some research. So if you're looking at finding that one, it's a situation where once you put them behind the fence, they're no longer part of your deck. They'll score you points, but you don't get any of their abilities anymore, which is always a cool component of, when you think about deck builders like Dominion, where it's like, oh, I bought a point card and it's clogging up my deck, but the point card has no ability. The better alpacas have really good abilities.
Yeah.
So when do you want to cull them from your deck and score the points from them, or how long do you want to keep using their powers? So
and $15 at Miniature Market right now, or $23 at Board Game Bliss. So
cool. My number, there is no number, just in the title. That's Five Towers, which is also available. This is one of those that's like new to me as opposed to new to the world. This came out in 2023, and the designer's Casper Lapp. But in Five Towers, it's essentially almost like you're bidding, but it's almost like a name that tune type of thing, where it's like five cards are laid out, and there are 4 or 5 different tower types, and you need to build your towers in ascending order. So, you have to have a descending order, a higher number at the bottom, lower numbers on top. And there are a couple of cards with special abilities that allow you to change that ruling up. But 5 cards are laid out in a display, and you go around the table and say, I'll take 3 of them. And Michael might say, I'll take 4 of them. And the next person's like, I'll take all 5 of them. And then they get all 5 cards, and then they've got to put them in their towers.
Place them.
But you only have one of each color tower, so whatever you're taking, you have to use, and sometimes that may be good for you or may not be good for you. And so I was kind of intrigued by that different auction mechanism and to see how that plays out in practice. So I'll be getting a copy of this shortly, and
awesome.
We'll kind of run it through the paces and see how that works. But for now, it intrigued me as we played it.
Yeah, once just getting a demo of that, my first thought was, I want to play that with kiddos, so either with my family or your family, and then I want to turn around and really compete and see what just to see the fit. I'm not sure where the fit for that game is, if it's more of a family game or if that is, as the people call the palate cleanser, the lighter game you play before you play your 3-hour brain burner. But there's some interesting things going on there with the auctioning and the forced placement.
I seem to think that one might be one that's attitude dependent, right? It might be able to fit both, just depending on how you approach the game and how the people at the table are. So
yeah, that's Doug trying to lecture me to be kind when I play it. So I noted.
Don't destroy me, Michael.
Yeah,
I can only cry into a pillow so often.
That's what you always say when I'm going to lose a game by 2 or 3 points. Speaking of, I thought I was winning this game. We played a full game of Patrician, Towers of Influence. Is that okay if I go there?
Yeah.
All right. This is from Calliope Games, designer Michael Schacht. Calliope ran a Kickstarter for this back in October, and it was right around the time that Doug and I were playing Zularetto. And so I had just been introduced to an awesome game by Michael Schacht. And when I looked up, what are new games that he's come out with, I saw that Calliope had run this Kickstarter, and I think I just missed it. And so it was nice. If you're patient in the hobby, you'll get to play a good game because good games stick around. And we got to go all the way through this game with tiny cards. This one does involve set collection, but also you're building out different parts of the board. And when all those cards have been played out, it scores. When all the cards of the same set I almost went colors there, but I was afraid I was going to pronounce colors wrong. So I'll just say fleur-de-lis, right? Let's say I have all the ones that have the fleur-de-lis symbol on it, and I play out the last one. That's the one that's going to score out. And there was just a wonderful tension at this 4-player game that we got through in about 15 minutes. And I know I was playing some rules wrong. Other people were because it was a demo, but we kept it moving. It was just a ton of fun. You're playing a card and taking a card from where you play it. And I kind of butchered the explanation there a little bit, but it is one that I want to come back to and play some more.
Well, it was a perfect game after talking about Euro games from last week's episode and talking about light hobby games and things like this. This certainly isn't a light hobby game, but definitely a Euro. And yeah, Michael said you've got a hand of cards. You will play a card. Depending on the color, you are going to place buildings and stack them up onto 2 piles. And each location has kind of a break point. So if there are, it might be 5, it might be 9. Once there are 5 sections to those towers in that area, then those towers are going to score. And whoever has the most influence or the most pieces in a tower is going to claim the higher point value. And then there's going to be a lower tower, and whoever has the highest in that is going to score the lower point value. And the ties are broken by who's on top, the last person to place. And then as you are playing those cards out, you're keeping them in front of you because there's a set collection element to the nobles that are on those cards. And
the nobles, not just the shields, the nobles.
Yeah, the nobles. The shields are telling you where to place, and there's some cards that allow you to place 2 sections, but there's no noble on it. Mm-hmm. And so you do that. So there's kind of in-game stuff that you're tracking and end-game stuff, and I was really surprised with it. It was a reprinted game. It was one that came out a while ago from Mayfair.
2007. Patrician was the original release, and not to just jump in there, but I was ready for that one. And the director of fun at Calliope Games, Chris Leader, is somebody that we see whenever we're out and about at one of these, and we hope to have him on the show. And he's one who gave us the full teach. What I want to ask him is, how do they take a 50-minute game and condense it down into 20 minutes? Because the initial release says 50 minutes of Patrician from 2007, but this one, Patrician Towers of Influence 2024, is a 20 to 50-minute game. And I'm just wondering if they did some streamlining there or if something was cleaned up. I didn't back this game initially or do the late pledge because of the colors, but now seeing it on the table, for new listeners, I don't do well all the time with sometimes blues and purples and greens and browns. And boy, they did a great job with the graphic design. It took a little bit, but then I hope I wasn't slowing it down the table too much. And fun little game with great decisions.
Yeah, no, and I believe it's available right now at Barnes & Noble exclusively, and then they'll be shipping out to backers and stuff like that. So you may be able to get that one now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they shrunk the time down, unless the original one was just hedging on the long end and did that. There's still the same number of players, 2 to 5 players, but moves fast. And like all Calliope games, if they are still doing what they do, I think they are, that everything is like ready to go right out of the box. You don't have to punch stuff out. It's all ready to go. So one of the things I really like about them as a company. So. Moving on, this one will be brief because I didn't really get a good explanation. We got a brief explanation at the booth, but didn't get a chance to sit down and play. It was kind of being hogged by a couple of players, and that was Forges of Ravenshire, which is coming out in June and July from BA Games and designer Sam Stockton. And it's got a cool little... just seemed like a classic Euro-type game of collecting resources and building stuff, but there is a cool mechanism, kind of reminded me of Coldwater Crown. You place a dice out, take an action, you take one back and take an action, and then you fire off your own little forge, and then the dice that you picked throughout the round also give you some sort of combination depending on how that goes. So not a lot of detail there, but it is one that I'm intrigued on checking out.
Same. I'm glad you brought that up. We ate dinner at the same table with Sam. Guy from Lincoln, Nebraska, who's put a lot into this game and a few other games as well. And I couldn't wait to play a demo. And when we got down there's a group that was playing a full game. I was like, well, we're not going to get to see this one. But it's one that, is, I think, being delivered as we speak on Kickstarter and should be in retail. You can also go right on the Kickstarter page and pre-order if you want to jump in and get it there, if you so choose.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued by the idea of I'm always interested in a roughly 90-minute game that is about the 2.5 complexity rating is kind of a nice sweet spot for me.
Good choices. Lots of things to build.
All right. Well, how about you? What's next?
Yeah. Do we want to go? I'm just looking. There's a lot of places. I'm going to talk about a game that I own. And I intentionally sat down at the demo because I was like, great, somebody else is going to get to teach it so that I'm not going to have to. And that's The Veil of Eternity. This was a board game media darling all the way back about 3 months ago, and it's kind of disappeared already. But in The Veil of Eternity, it's sitting right behind me here on the shelf. It's you're running, for any of our fantasy football or fantasy basketball or fantasy baseball fans in the crowd, you're running a snake draft at the start of the round. So if you're the first player drafting a card in a 3-player game, that means you're going to get the first card and then the last card of the round. If you're the third player drafting, you're going to get picks 3 and 4. And you have these nice little tokens that you just place down to let people know that that's the card that you're taking. And once you get the card into your hand, now you have some choices to make. You can use the ability of that card, or each card has its own little currency. But the thing about the Veil of Eternity, you're limited. You can only have 4 of the currency tokens at one time. If you want to have more than that, you have to burn one and let it go. So it has that efficiency building built into, okay, what do I need to do now? When I tried to play this one with my kiddos, all of the cards are unique. And so that initial learn of text was a barrier. I'm just like, hey, thanks for letting me run through a few turns with you. I think we're going to move on. But it's one that I could see that if I can get a few games in of this, I think it could be a lot of fun because of the drafting, how you handle your currency, the different abilities, and then it's a race. The end game condition is first one that gets to 60 points triggers the end game, and everybody else gets one turn. Or I think it's the first one to 10 cards, something like that. But it's a cool little game. Mandu Games is somebody that a Korea designer that came out with it, and then I think Renegade brought it to North America. But one that I'm excited to get to the table here over the next few months, and it's out now that we got to see a demo of, The Veil of Eternity.
All right, well, I guess I'll talk about a game that's in my collection as well, and that one is called Dreadful Meadows by Arcus and designer Lucas Adam. Dreadful Meadows, the Kickstarter came out a couple months ago. It got released, and they are making a retail edition that will become available to a wider audience. I don't know if there's any of the deluxe versions left, but essentially in Dreadful Meadows, you are kind of Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween-esque purveyors of candy, and you are planting fields and producing candy and then buying more equipment to harvest them. It's an awesome theme and production on top of and interesting mechanisms that it's like I can just as easily say that this theme drew me to the game as much as the mechanisms, and I potentially, if the theme were different, may have ignored this game. But it's very bright colors, pops off the table, amazing artwork.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in getting that one to the table and giving it a try. It's been unfortunately sitting on my shelf for a little bit too long.
Yeah, we'll have to get played. I liked how the market worked and just the purchasing decisions and some of those. Now, granted, we saw a 15-minute demo of it, but it was cool. That's a good one. Doug, let's pivot and talk about our friends over at Amigo.
All right.
If they've got 2 games, do you want to take the game that I believe you've played, or am I making that up? Did you get that played over the weekend?
If you're referring to Kabanga, then yes, I have gotten that played.
But hold on, I'm going to talk about a Reiner Knizia game that I played all by myself 2 weeks ago that has been re-implemented called Pick-a-Pen Gardens. So I recently played a game called Cascadito, which is a little roll and write that was thrown in with the Cascadero. And as I'm playing this game, Pick-a-Pens, I thought, I know the rules to this because I just played this game solo all by myself. I truly did. I was sitting there playing it, but in Pick-a-Pen, the pens are dice. So just think about that for a moment, folks. You throw these pencils. Sorry, they call it Pick-a-Pen, but it's pencils. You throw these pencils up, and where they land, you go ahead and draft the one with pips. And they might say 4, might say 1, might say 3, might say 5. You know how dice work. And you're going to scratch off that many a territory. And then there's some bonus combos. And I don't mean to get derisive. Everyone knows I love the good Dr. Reiner Knizia. But this was one where I just had to laugh and chuckle because I was like, I have played this game so recently.
I have played this game under another title.
Yes. So that's one that will be coming out from Amigo that, in all seriousness, if it hits the right audience, it could be a hit because how those pencils work as dice, I think is kind of a cool little twist. You're not rolling dice and writing in. You're rolling pencils and then writing in. So we'll see where that one goes. It could be a total flop, could be a hit, but that's Pick-a-Pen Gardens. And the fact that it's Pick-a-Pen -Gardens, that tells you that there's going to be 18 different versions. There's going to be vegetable gardens. There's going to be Pick-a-Pen's fruit trees. There's going to be Pick-a-Pen's grocery stores. There's going to be all different versions of Pick-a-Pen.
And what was the one that you had played? That was very much like it.
Cascadito.
I'll be waiting for the Cascadito -games, so that there's
because that's
Gardens.
a small box roll and write of the big box Cascadero, which are two pretty cool games. But I digress.
All right, I got to play Kabanga, which is gaining quite a bit of buzz. Currently only available in German, but will be coming out shortly in North America.
Sehr gut.
And this is designed by Michael Modler and Amigo Games. And in Kabanga, there are 4 different colors. Those colors have numbers on them. And there is a kind of 4 center cards matching those colors that are just a kind of a signifier of where you're placing the colors. Each side of those markers, there is 2 starting number cards. On your turn, you play a card out of your hand into one of those piles, the pile matching the color of the card that you're playing, and then you compare the numbers on either side of the marker. And depending on how big of a gap there is, other players may be able to discard some of their cards. The goal of the game is to get rid of as many cards as possible, or get rid of all of your cards. The cards that you have left in your hand, similar to Take 5, have kind of a point scoring system. You'll score points, which you don't want. And it's really fun and fascinating game because the game kind of starts out and you put, maybe there's a 12 and a 15 and you throw down a 14 and you feel pretty confident nobody's going to have that 13. And if somebody does have that 13, they discard it out of their hand and then you draw a card as a penalty. So they don't give you that card, but you get another card added to your pile.
Which, as the game is winding down, is a wonderful little tension point.
Yeah, which can be good or bad. Sometimes it actually can help you out. But then it's also interesting because sometimes you're avoiding, you kind of have a big gap of like, I'm going to put down this 3 and it's going to be a 3 to a 14. And then all of a sudden you're like, nobody could possibly have, or there's no way I'm getting out of this clean. And then nobody plays anything. Nobody has the cards in between there. And so it's got this great kind of tension of, can I get away with this one now? Maybe I can, maybe I can't. And really fun, fast playing, and it has all of those same vibes as a No Thanks and a Take 5. And I think it's going to do really well for them. So that's Kabanga.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, let's jump around here a little bit. I'm just going to talk very brief. I don't even know what that game's about to say much about it. Okay, Lucky Duck, who's recently been acquired by Goliath Games, has a game coming out, Nestlings. And this was another one where folks were kind of wanting to play the full game instead of getting a demo. But designer Brandon Omi, artist Nilajan Malakar, publisher currently listed on Board Game Geek is Tangerine Games, but Lucky Duck will be publishing it here in North America. Folks, this scaffolds, this is like a Wingspan Junior, in my opinion. People will probably shake their head and say, no way, I won't allow that. But even some of the scoring has the similar scoring graphics as Wingspan. But really cute bird game with incredible production, but it's colorful. I don't quite know what's actually happening in the game. I was paying attention.
He's declared it a Wingspan wrap-up, but isn't sure exactly how it works.
Well, that's all I could think of as I was sitting there watching it with the different biomes and dice, and just some of the graphics were so similar. I felt like, okay, folks, move over, share the table. I want to sit down and play. I've heard enough. And that's what I mean. I was drawn to the table to play that. Yeah. And it's from what I understand, from what I heard in the demo, is that it has the exact inverse of Wingspan, though, that as the game moves along, right, you get to actually make more decisions. You get more options. Whereas in Wingspan, sometimes as the game moves along, your decision space starts to shrink, right? And so that's a really cool game that I am certain I will get played at some point. I just don't know if I'm going to run out and pick it up because I am full on bird games. I'd have to get rid of 3 bird games to bring one more bird game into this house.
Yeah, it seemed intriguing. I'm similar boat as you. I got most of it, but it seemed like one of those things where it's like I just needed to play it to get how it was one of those that was like a weird kind of demo where I'm like, you're going too far past and explaining extra rules, and I'm missing the big picture in some ways. So, but I am intrigued by trying it out, but I also do have the bird fatigue as well. So, another game from Lucky Ducks that didn't really get a chance to see too much, but I'm intrigued by it, and I want to throw it out there as anybody that's listened to this show has known that Michael and I have talked a lot about Snow White, the Gemstone Mining game, which is a reprint of a game called Quartz. And Lucky Duck Games is going to be coming out with Quartz, the dice game, which was originally released in 2022, but is now in Germany, but is now coming out in the U.S. So I've read the rules on it. Seems very intriguing. Has a lot of the elements of the original Quartz and the Snow White game. They said if this does well, they may be able to reprint Quartz, but that's not necessarily in the plans right now. So if you're looking for something in that same genre, give that one a look out, and that's Quartz, the dice game.
Yeah, and speaking of dice games from Lucky Duck, this one was truly shocking. I had to do a double take for multiple reasons. My Shelfie, the dice game, is on the way, folks, and that's not the shocking part. The shocking part is you have a roll and write dice game. Matthew Dunstan didn't design it. Phil Walker Harding didn't design it. They designed the initial version of My Shelfie. This is designed by none other than Simone Luciani, who has designed such games as Darwin's Journey, Tiletum, Rats of Worcester, Nucleum, Barrage, Marco Polo 2, In the Service of the Khan, Newton, Lorenzo Il Magnifico, Voyages of Marco Polo. Heavy games. I'm talking 2-3 hour hobby level games to see him come out. So I'm intrigued to hear what the story is behind that one. I own My Shelfie. I enjoy it. I love how it plays on Board Game Arena as well. So little box, some dice, and boy, the people that were playing it, they were not sharing the table. They played a full game, and so we just had to keep it moving. So I thought I'd mention that one too.
Yep. I've got one quick one here that I want to try it. This is probably like a great convention game. I don't know if it's one I'll ever own. And I just feel like my sphere of audience is not cut out for this, but I want to play it, and that's Archaeologic, which is by Ludonaut and Flat River Group. And it is a deduction game in which you're trying to figure out the locations of the map and kind of get it all set up. But what was unique about it is it kind of combined that Thebes or Takedo mechanism of you can go basically in order to ask questions of the device on the table, which kind of reminded me of something like Turing Machine. You have to spend time, and how much time you're going to spend to ask the specific question that you want to ask. You may be leaving a window open for other players to ask multiple questions in the same amount of time. And so that marriage of mechanisms of deduction with that, how good of a clue do you want, was really intriguing to me. It's not a game my family's going to play with me. I don't know how often I would ever get into the game group, but it is certainly one that I want to try, and it is available now. It's already come out, but I certainly missed it and didn't hear a lot about it. So just wanted to mention it briefly here. And that's Archaeologic.
Cool. Yeah, that one looked fun. I looked like a nightmare for me to try to figure out in a 15-minute demo, but that's one where I'd want to watch a video, read the rules, and sit down and play. I'm glad you brought that one up. How many more games do you have on your list?
I've got 3 that I want to highlight.
All right, then I have one that I want to highlight. So why don't you take one more, then I'll throw one out.
All right. One of them, I was able to play the French version. It's not been, will be coming out at Gen Con, and it's one that just really struck with me, and that is a game called Captain Flip. This is by Playpunk, and the designer is Remy Canzadori and Paolo Mori. Paolo Mori, you might recognize. He's done Rise of Augustus and Archaeo Society, Libertalia. The
Usual Suspects.
Yes, a lot of games. And in Captain Flip, you have a pirate ship map in front of you with 5 columns going up. And sometimes the rows start at different levels, so they're not always straight across the board. But you're going to draw a tile from a bag. It's going to go in, you have to build the columns up, so you'd have to start at the bottom row of a column and then can work up. But you don't have to fill in all of the rows before you can advance up. But you pull out a tile and you look at the one side. And you can take that tile and you can add it to your ship, or you can flip it over and put that tile in your ship. But if you flip it over, you can't go back to the first side. So there's a little bit of a push your luck element to it of when it's going to work and not work. And it's got some unique elements. Like, for example, there's a monkey tile that when you play it down, you flip over an adjacent tile that's already on your board and reactivate it. So that has like a little bit of a memory thing. And sometimes you can get a double bonus out of it. But then there's gunners that give you huge amounts of points right when you place them. But if you have 3 of them by the end of the game, you lose. And so there's this element of, this one's not very good. Maybe I'll flip it. Son of gun, there's another gunner. And I did not want that to happen. And so once it reminded me of a little bit of that Sushi Go, of like that simple drafting element to it, simple set collection. There's a swabby that if you have 1 in every column, you get more points, type of a set collection thing. And it that's simple. And if you play the game once and you then, there's a player aid that tells you what each thing, and there might be 8 to 10 different types of tiles. Not a ton, but after one game, you got a pretty good idea of what they all do, and you don't need that anymore. And once you get to that level, to me, that's where it's fun, where you can draw it out and you don't have to look down and say, what does this tile do again? Once you get to that level, you're off to the races, and there's 4 different ship playmats in it. So there's some variety there as well. You get points for getting to the top of a column or different special abilities. And just a great family weight game. So I'm going to play it tonight with my nephew, and I'm going to see how that goes over.
Awesome. What's the name of it?
It's called Captain Flip.
Cool.
So a new company was started, Playpunk, with I believe Paulo Mari, Antoine Bauza, and somebody else, but a good little group of designers that are like, we just want to make some fun games. And I'm curious to see where Playpunk goes, and I'm curious to see how Captain Flip does.
That's great. Well, I can't wait to hear about it. The last game that I played is called Squirrel or Die, and it's a very small box game that we played with the designer Seppi Yoon, and the game was released in 2014, and we were walking down to demo night, so we're on our way down to play 4 hours of games, and the designer said, hey, you want to play a game quick? Well, Doug and I aren't going to turn that down, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details other than you need to keep the squirrels alive, so you got to feed them, and because winter is coming. And so there's a little bit of hand management and, a little bit of strategy is where you play some, but a ton of luck as well. And it's a game that I'd heard people talk about, but never actually got to play. And I felt like, that's a nice little gem to get to play with the designer. Ranked at 13,425 overall on Board Game Geek as of today. And I'm so impressed with independent publishers when they can just get out, design games and go talk about their games, and design more games and go talk about their games. And that's a grind. And to be able to do that year in and year out, convention season in and convention season out, that impresses me. So I just wanted to mention that one as well.
Well, going to the exact end of the spectrum, I want to talk about a new game that just came out from Uwe Rosenberg.
Yeah.
So unknown to very known. This is coming out right now, if it's not already available. That's Capstone Games' Tangram City. And this is a game that anybody that knows me, I love the spatial perception, putting tiles out onto a grid, trying to maximize my space. And in this game, you have a bunch of polyomino tiles. They're kind of weird. They're tangrams, not polyominoes, but you got tangrams. And everybody
What's
has
a tangram, Doug?
It's an awkwardly shaped puzzle piece. I don't know what is the technical term for it. Do you know?
I don't know. That's why I asked you. Go ahead. I'll send it back. It wasn't a trick question.
Tangram. I'm going to look it up right now. A tangram definition. All of our librarians and teachers are yelling at us right now about how big of an idiot we are, and I wish I could type tangrams.
Tangram shaped tiles in a randomly determined order.
This
looks
geometrically
so
shaped
Uwe.
pieces into a particular design.
I'm going to love this game.
So anyway, everybody gets the same set of tiles, and on one side are city, the other side is parks, and you are placing your tiles out, trying to make completed squares over the course of 6 rounds, I believe, and you're going to play every tile that you have is going to come up, and that order is determined randomly by cards. And there's some hidden information where I know what tiles are coming that you may not know, and there's some that's public. But as you place them down each round, at the end of each round, you're basically scoring 1 point for every square in your biggest rectangle. So you're trying to kind of get a mass going, and you score points each round as you make that bigger and bigger. But then the kicker is at the end of the game, you want to have equal parks and city. And if you can balance that right, you get 20 bonus points. If you're off by 1, you get 10 bonus points. So you maybe have one more park than you do. And it's a very relaxing game, but that hidden information, sometimes I looked across the board. I played this with my daughter, and I looked across the board, and I'm like, why did she put that there? And I'm like, I wonder, what's the tile that she knows is coming? Is that going to fit there? And then looking at what I know is coming. And so it worked out really well although there wasn't a ton of interaction, the game moved fast enough that I was engrossed with my own puzzle that I didn't care about that. Usually that's something I care about in the game quite a bit. And this one was one that just seemed to flow so well that I forgot all about that, which was cool.
Awesome.
And the last one on my list, which was the highlight for me, and I cannot wait to play this and share it with Michael, and that is from Queen Games, and it's called Dabavala. by Felix Leader and Patricia Limburger. This is coming out shortly, and if not shortly, Gen Con. I couldn't quite figure out exactly when it was coming out. But Dabbawala is a game based on the delivery service in India, in Mumbai, that is almost a cooperative type of thing. There is no organized company, but essentially what they do is families cook food for the folks that are at work, and these couriers deliver it to the offices so they can have home-cooked meals, fresh home-cooked meals everywhere based on some of the dietary stuff that goes on in India. And so in this game, you are going around to different houses collecting the dabbas, which are basically lunch boxes, and the dabbas are polyomino shapes, and you are putting them on your little player board that is a cart, stacking them as high as you can, to then later deliver them. And so you're collecting cards to collect these, and then the cards that you're playing to put those lunch boxes and containers into your cart, you save. You then have to deliver those, which you use the cards that you saved that you played during the first round, and you are going to deliver one layer at a time. And so I'm on my top layer, and maybe I have some red ones and some blue ones. I am then going to try and play my cards out of my hand to increase the value or the tip value of delivering those colors. And other people are trying to raise theirs. Maybe they also have red, so they're going to try and do that. Other people might look around and say, I want to lower that down so you don't get as many tips. So you get the value of whatever the tip level is on based on the number of lunch boxes that you deliver each time. And so I love the dual nature of kind of that spatial perception polyomino of filling up my grid and collecting those, but keeping an eye on the cards for the second round. And then you go to the second round, and it's almost like this little mini stock market game, but all in a family-friendly, approachable system that I feel like fits in that Ticket to Ride wheelhouse of like, yeah, this is a game that we can sit down and play, and is chunky enough to be engaging. It's not too basic, but it's not overwhelming either.
Interesting.
One of the statistics that was crazy, I think they said there's about 20 or 30 of these people that deliver these meals in Mumbai, and their accuracy rate is 99.999999, which means that they have one mistake out of every 16 million deliveries.
What?
So I may have some of the story wrong, but my understanding is that Jeff Bezos wanted to buy it to learn about the efficiency, but it's not a company. It's not something that you can buy.
Yeah.
It's like a cooperative. And the delivery people are all uneducated people that have developed this system of colors and numbers of getting these lunch boxes to where they need to go and back home again.
Oh, cool.
It's really remarkable. So the history behind it, along with the gameplay, just really won my heart over, and I'm interested to play it and try it out and introduce it to new people, because I think it's one that I don't know if it'll fly under the radar or where it will land, but for me, I can see it being a hit.
Awesome.
So that is going to do it for our hype episode. Couple of things to look out for. YouTube, we've got some more overview videos, so check those out. Go to the Discord. We'd love to hear about your thoughts on if you've played some of these games, if you're looking forward to them. We'd like to hear about that as well. Gameschooler.com/Discord. Continue to spread the word about the podcast. If you have questions for us or comments, reach out to us. Email at gameschooler.com. You can subscribe to the podcast and follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. Next week, I'm not sure what we're talking about yet. We'll probably got to do a little bit more discussion on that.
We might have an interview lined up, but we'll see what we're going to talk about. We'll see. Yeah. Teaser.
So we want to thank everybody for listening, especially for Daisy, who I hope is listening to this episode. And thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.